All right. Yeah, this is a request from Pete. Musicians talking about Chris Cornell. I thought this would be good. I see it, and I've been wanting to do it for a while. So yeah, musicians talking about Chris Cornell. But yeah, let's go.
For me, and I guess this is like a posthumous thing, I didn't realize the impact that Chris had on me as a writer and as a singer until I really started thinking about the fact that he had no boundaries when it came to writing music and doing whatever he wanted. If he wanted to try a genre, he'd do it. I mean, he was completely fearless. And for me, watching that over the years, I was so inspired by that. Whether it was the heaviness of stuff like Jesus Christ Pose or the beautiful acoustic stuff like Seasons that he did on the singles soundtrack. I've been a fan of his songwriting for so long that I almost took it for granted, you know, and my only regret is that I never got to tell him, you know, like I had met him several times and I never got to tell him what his music meant to me. And I guess that's, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do Outshine last night as much as I did, because it just meant that much to me.
I remember him not speaking to the crowd for like a good year or two, like when I first joined. The way that he would perform back then is he sort of went into this trance. When I would watch those guys before I joined, I was just really mesmerized by the way Chris would just sort of like turn into this shaman kind of dude, you know. Eventually he became more comfortable with an audience, and I just think he was naturally a really shy person, believe it or not.
When it happened with Chris, um, I gotta say, I still don't think I've had to be somewhat in denial. And one way I was even able to do it, and it's not, I don't even feel like I had a choice. I was just terrified where I would go if I allowed myself to feel what I needed to feel or what
When did Eddie Vedder turn into Barry White? Jesus.
I was instinctively wanted to feel, or how dark I felt like I was going to go. And because I didn't see him that often in the last 10 years, probably only like 4 or 5 times, and usually at a gig or something, yeah, I just kind of, I still haven't quite dealt with it, or, I'll get stronger as time goes, but we were close, and it wasn't just because we were playing music or we were, neighbors. I would hang out with him outside of the band more than, even the other band guys. And I didn't know that many people in Seattle. So we would go on, crazy hiking adventures, or we'd go mountain biking, or we would chase the dog in the rain with drinking shitty beer, and it was cool.
Chris was such a beautiful guy, man. He was the sweetest person. He was so talented. He had so much to offer that it was a real shock to hear that he had gone. But, I think that mental health and depression is something that people should really take seriously. And there's a stigma attached to it that's unfortunate, because just as you take care of yourselves in every other way, I think it's important that people really try to take care of themselves in that way too. And it ain't easy, life's hard, but
like you said, people, you got it so together. I mean, that just goes to show you, it doesn't matter what's in your, what's in your bank account, or how many hits are on your YouTube page, or all that kind of crap. It all goes out the window if you're, like Dave said, if you're not feeling right, And so
Is anybody else getting the feeling from these two that they don't believe he killed himself? Look, if I was, and I'm not a body language expert by any stretch of the imagination, but just kind of off of instinct, to me, it looks like they're, do you know what I mean? They've hunched forward, they're covering themselves, and their arms is across a, like, they're not like relaxed. Does anybody get a feeling? Or it might be that they're upset about talking about it, but I don't know. It seems like this seems a bit like the clips of like what Cat Williams was saying, how everybody was saying Cat Williams was a crackhead, and he didn't turn up to, he got banned from Hollywood because he didn't turn up and things, and he's like, that's not true. You can ring any studio and ask them. They've never lost money having me in a film, never. And people have gone back and got the interviews where people have just kind of reinstated the falsehood that what Cat Williams says the Illuminati wanted it to be said about Cat Williams. But it looks to me like they don't. It's either that they're uncomfortable. They're not comfortable. Put it that way. Now you can interpret any way you want, but I'd say it's because either they know he didn't kill himself, or they really don't think he killed himself. Because yeah, they've hunched and covering themselves, like arms covering, like.
Chris would like not. To
And
get
he
into
can't
Chris
even
Cornell
say
making
his
another
words.
record again is my selfish version of it, and there's such a bigger, you know, such a bigger hurt beyond my own selfish. You know, I barely knew him a little bit, but what I did know him, he was super cool. I didn't know Chester very well at all, but I knew Chris a little bit, and Dave knew him a little bit too, and we just loved his records, man. Like we.
Not getting conspiracy now. I'm not gonna go on another rant, but it's funny that he brought up Chester, because yeah, there's definite a connection between them two. Well, and put it this way, from things I've been watching recently, like I wouldn't be surprised if they both of them got bumped off for what they was involved in terms of that documentary about exposing child trafficking.
Some of the first stuff me and Dave ever jammed on when we would just goof around in the jam room or in the rehearsal room in between Biff. I can remember as far back as when I first joined the band and me and you just playing like, you know, Soundgarden riffs together.
Yeah.
And I remember making Nothing Left to Lose with the guy who engineered and produced some of their records. And we would just like listen to their records a lot. They're big inspiration for us as musicians. And Chris Cornell is just a master. So, you know, the loss, it's a bummer, but like Dave said, you know, that's a real thing.
Look after yourselves and your
Look
mates.
after yourself, and if it looks like someone's down, way down, check on them.
He was just he was a really amazing human being, you know, and we, you know, like Seattle's not that big of a town like you said before, so we you know, it was just I remember, you know, just hanging out, going out in the woods with like a half rack of beer and a couple of dogs and about 3 or 4 of us cruising through the woods and going down to the beach and just being kind of buffoons, going to each other's shows. He was always consistent to me, you know, like there's always a handful of people in your life that no matter how many years pass or whatever, when you see them, it's the same look in their eyes and you have that same connection, and it never changed with him. You know, I'll miss that, but I also treasure a lot of times that I had with him, and also his legacy as an artist. You know, it's an amazing body of work, and Soundgarden has always been one of my favorite bands, and I think a very like a flagpole band for the rest of us in the Northwest, because they were around before anybody, you know,
Right.
except for maybe, you know, the Stone and Jeff and the Green River days and stuff, you know, but I think they were pretty much the band we all looked up to, you know.
Well, it does make you hug those around you, for sure.
bandmates, family that's out here, family at home. It makes you realize that, you know, there's a darkness that anyone and everyone can find and feel that they're trapped in. And when you're there, and at least I know the depth of my darkness at times, it is difficult when you're in that space to even fathom that there's someone there that can help you or has been through that before. Sometimes you're just in it's such a loss. I obviously can't explain what he was going through, but we all have our darknesses, and check in with each other. Let each other know how you're doing. Yes, it's a sad story, and there's a lot of sad stories recently, you know, especially in the grunge world, losing a lot of people, and for us, Lemmy, and all of the things that have been happening the last couple of years. It just makes us feel even more grateful to be out here doing what we're doing here.
I think it was a culmination of a lot of things. It felt like the end of, like, this band formed over the love of two bands. It formed over the love of the Beatles and Soundgarden. And so to lose, to be that close in proximity and, opening for Soundgarden was just the highest of highs. Like I couldn't believe it. Like, we were just elated to be there, and to have it end so tragically, that added kind of shock of, like, we were right there. We were there that night. I talked to Chris Cornell. I gave him a hug. I watched him leave the venue, and then the night went on as normal, and to wake up the next morning to the immense, just the bus, like the wait, like I sleep late, so I was the last to find out, and I woke up and walked into the front lounge, and everyone's just like head in hand, devastated, and everyone kind of looked up at me and went, "She doesn't know. Oh, it's gonna be bad." So I don't know that there's an exact answer to that. It's just I think that music has such a power to it that even if you don't know someone extraordinarily well personally, when you've related to their music and you've listened to those records, throughout your whole life ad nauseum, it feels like a part of you at that point. And so I feel like, losing someone like that, you feel like you're losing a piece of yourself in a way, if that makes sense. And also, in the grander scheme, like, losing someone who's that talented and that prolific, is just devastating, because it's like, well, that was it. Like, that was it. No, like, that it can't be it. And so it's a big, it's a shock, and it's a trauma, and it's but the good news is that why I think music is so powerful is that it lives on for eternity. Like, the music is your legacy, and that can never die. And I think that's really beautiful.
And I was in a band, those 3 Audioslave records, and while Chris was a friend and while Chris was a bandmate, I never stopped being a fan of his, and his ability to craft melody out of the ether. You could throw, whether it was a few simple chords like the song Like a Stone, or whether it was some complicated, heavy riff, he would effortlessly create something that was either beautiful or terrifying.
And is there an adjustment for you as a guitar player that all of a sudden you're working with a new guy?
Yes, absolutely. Not so much working with a new guy, but working with, like, a melodic singer. And his strengths were with melody, and it really challenged and pushed Tim and Brad and I. Like, the music of Rage Against the Machine is James Brown based. It all comes around to the one. It's like it's the same driving beat and the same driving rhythm that comes around, because it's rapping, and it's like the excellent punk rock vocals of Zach. With Chris, in order to allow him to shine, there had to be this kind of harmonic counterpoint. So it really, like that song Like a Stone was, it's a few simple chords, but allows Chris's beautiful voice to soar.
We're here tonight to honor a compassionate, just, and gentle human being who I had the great pleasure of calling my friend, Chris Cornell. But before knowing Chris as a friend, I knew Chris as a fan, like most of you. I've been a huge fan of his music, his band, Soundgarden, and his voice. His voice was always honest, caring, and real. It's difficult to successfully lie through art. The man himself was always caring, honest, and real. A few years back, when Eric Israelian told me that Chris was a huge supporter of the film, The Promise, I was ecstatic to hear about his involvement, I was excited to work with him on the film. Chris did not just provide the title theme song for The Promise. His spirit was interwoven into the film, and his steady guiding hand was felt by everybody he spoke to about the film. Chris identified with the Armenian tragedy because he realized that his wife's family, who are Greek, had suffered a similar fate in the final days of the Ottoman Empire. And he also realized that the suffering of all these people was universal and still present in the world today. Genocide is the humanitarian disease that we cannot seem to rid our planet of. Chris wanted his song to not only reflect the emotions of victims and their loved ones, but also provide hope and inspiration for the future. Through their foundation, Chris and Vicky Cornell wanted to make a difference in helping the world's most vulnerable children. When Chris learned that all of the proceeds from the film were going to be ultimately donated to charitable organizations, he also made the decision to donate all of his proceeds from the song to support refugees and children. For all of his accomplishments, and most notably his dedication to human rights through this work, it is an honor to present Human Rights Watch's inaugural The Promise Award to Chris Cornell.
Yeah, Chris, man, we just lost, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was 2 years yesterday.
Yeah.
I seen somebody put it up. That's why I was like, you knew him from Seattle.
Yeah.
You knew him before you came down here?
I did.
No shit.
Yeah. And then Susan Silver was pregnant with Lily when my Susan was pregnant with May. So we had two pregnant, wives together and had little babies.
So his oldest daughter is Susan's?
Yeah, Lily is is 18.
The one he was bringing on stage and singing with her, with him?
That's his second oldest daughter.
No shit.
Yeah.
So you knew those guys? Was he really a cook at one of those places that sell salmons?
We were all cooks.
What was the name of that chain?
I think he was at Roy's Bait House. It's actually Ray's Boathouse.
Ray's Boathouse.
Yeah, Roy's Bait House.
And then what was the other one that just sold salmon and shit like that?
Ivers?
Ivers.
Yeah. Ivers is killer. Yeah, I mean, that's how you, like, if you were a punk rock kid or whatever in Seattle, you did construction and you were a cook. You were in the back. So you started as a dishwasher because we had blue hair, we had whatever. We weren't presentable to be a waiter, a busboy. You had to work back behind the line. And so all of us probably are great cooks to this day,
I have to say, from listening to the book, well, it's not his book, but it's because a lot of this, it's obviously after his death and talking about his death, but when you listen to the book, and like the mate that wrote it done a great job of getting quotes, and he did. It is true, he suffered with depression his whole life, but like his death really comes as a shock, even when you're listening to the step by step of his life. Like it really comes out of nowhere. Like he does talk of depression, it does come up, and there's quotes of him talking about it, but then like you're just listening to this story basically of Chris Cornell and his thoughts, and he was doing this project, that project. Soundgarden had just got back together. He was well into that. Like, and then all of a sudden you're like, they start talking about the hotel room, and you start thinking, oh, hold on. This is his death. Like, it doesn't make sense. Even if you're step by stepping through his life, it just doesn't make sense. It's a real, weird one. And like I say, not to get into a conspiracy thing, but you can watch Sean Atwood's podcast, and he's got hundreds and hundreds of ex-police officers talking about child exploitation going as high as the royal family and to the British elite, and that it goes on all around the world. And well, you've seen it with Epstein, Do you know what I mean? Epstein got suicided, literally. Do you know what I mean? That's like one that's so obviously he got killed, but they just still stick to no, yeah, suicide. Just forget about it. Like, yeah. But I can't remember who said it as well. One was Tom Morello. Him saying about Chris is he was like his thing was melody. So true. I'm so glad he said that because that's something that people like. Yeah, he has a great voice, but a great voice is only half the thing if you can't write and you can't find a melody for that great voice. But Chris did have both. He was blessed with both. He was blessed with the voice and just this unbelievable, like he said, like it's an unbelievable ability to just find melody. It's unreal. Yeah, he is. Yeah, and the other one was I can't remember who said it, but they said about his songwriting. That's another thing I think with Chris Cornell. I say it well. I've said it multiple times. People that have watched my Soundgarden or Chris Cornell, like the voice is incredible. He is, if not the, then one of the greatest voices in rock ever. Do you know what I mean? In music, in the world. Do you know what I mean? He has one of the greatest voices. But his songwriting, and I think like I said it, his voice kind of overshadows other things like his songwriting. Like he doesn't get the credit for being the songwriter that he is. You hear people say Chris Cornell greatest singer, like you hear that, but when they talk of great rock songwriters, you don't hear Chris Cornell in that thing, and he really should be. As much as Frank Zappa should be mentioned in with guitar players, Chris Cornell should be mentioned in with songwriters. His songwriting is exceptional. Like yeah. But like I say, that voice is yeah, it just overshadows everything. I'm not going to say that voice ain't incredible because it is, but it's kind of, in a way, it's a great thing that he had that voice, but in a way, it's a kind of, it's a curse for him too, because like I say, people don't appreciate his other aspects. There's more to him than just a great voice. Like, and again, a bit like him being a Beatles fanatic. Um, really, he was very similar to them. I don't think there's been a group ever that's had quite the work rate and success as the Beatles did. What was it? 6 years, 13 albums. Was it 20 something number ones or something? Or 19 something? I don't know. Like all within 6 years. And plus movies, touring, whatever else the Beatles are doing. But Chris Cornell is very similar. And that's, again, like I say, it's one of the things that really makes his death even more, I won't say suspicious, but more just odd. Honestly, it's the total fucking Godhead book. Get it? Because it is. It's just like his death just comes out of nowhere. It's like going from project to project to project to like I say, they start talking about the hotel and people not being able to get hold of him, and you're like, hold on, like he's been killing it, like killing it, and then boom. Yeah, it's a very strange one. Very strange one. And I know people don't like conspiracies, but to be fair, if you just actually look, these aren't conspiracies anymore. Like I say, police officers, prison people, in our country are going out and doing podcasts now talking about Freemason. Today I listened to a policeman talking about Freemason controlling the police and them having to kind of, if you're not a Freemason, you can just fuck off basically, or they'll make things difficult for you, or you just need to shut your mouth, right? Yeah. So you see that like, and there's police officers coming out now talking about all the kind of satanic, like devil worshipping, child sacrificing that the police have known about it for years. But it, like, there's one John Wedger. Look up John Wedger in our country, and he's a policeman that, like, he said if you investigate up to a certain level, you get told to just leave off basically. And if you don't, do you know what I mean? You either just get fired or just get moved to something, like, yeah. But like I say, it's not just policemen, it's everybody. Prison officers. Prison officers coming out talking about how the senior officers in the prison was abusing inmates, the younger inmates and things. Like, yeah. And that these people have a way of covering things up. So that's what I'm saying. Chris Cornell's, one, his death is suspicious, and two, what he was kind of involved in is something that will get you suicided. They don't care in front of the whole world. Like I say, we saw it with Epstein. They killed that man in front of the whole world, and basically, like, it's the equivalent. They done the equivalent of basically like when a little kid like knocks over a vase or something and smashes it, and you come in and go, "Did you just knock that over?" And they go, "Nah, nah, it's a monster." It was almost as like, do you know what I mean? Like, it was that ridiculousness of a answer when they said that, yeah, Epstein killed himself. And conveniently, the cameras weren't working at that point. And that's what I mean. That's what, like, the more and more of people, professional people coming out and saying that this about the system is satanic, it is pretty much everything that the conspiracy theorists have been saying is pretty much true. But yeah, anyway, that's the reaction. Sweet.